Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today we look at environmental racism. Is it possible that pollution could actually be a civil rights issue? Now, right now in the United States, if you're black or Asian or Latino, the air that you breathe is more polluted, or could be more polluted, than if you happen to be white. Now, what about if you're white and from a poor community? Well, the likelihood of being exposed to industrial pollution is higher as well. And that's because it's generally cheaper and easier to build coal and petroleum facilities, sewage fields, even industrial pig farms in low-income communities. Property prices are lower and people have fewer resources to fight back. Activists call it environmental racism. The Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, is monitoring these issues right here in the United States, and it's making a new environmental justice plan. But critics say it's falling short of protecting civil rights. We heard about this issue, well, not from our team, as good as our team happens to be, but from our online community. Malika?
Right, where some of our best ideas come from. So as you mentioned, the idea for today's show came from a recent open editorial that the stream held on the lingering effects of segregation in the US. Now, we heard from guests across the country who said where you live often dictates even what kind of air you breathe.
You have, Black people have disproportionately shoddy housing, tend to live near Superfund sites or landfills or, refineries. The fact that climate change is increasing, these weather events means that our communities are going to continue to be put in harm's way.
Well, to join the conversation, tweet us at #AJStream. Femi?
And with us to discuss U.S. environmental justice, we have in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Gregory Mitchell, representing the concerned citizens of the University Place Subdivision. In Chicago, Illinois, Samuel Corona is a community advocate with the Southeast Environmental Task Force. In Buffalo, New York, Rebecca Newberry, Executive Director of the Clean Air Coalition. And in Oakland, California, Julian Mocine-McQueen is a Director of Education and Outreach for Green for All. So good to have you here, everybody. Samuel, I'm ashamed to admit, but a week ago, before I started working on this show, I had no idea what pet coke actually was. Can you explain what it is?
Well, pet coke is actually a waste product that comes from the refining of the tar sands that come from Canada. Yeah. And it comes from BP facility that's just right over the border from us in Indiana. All right. And we get the waste product just put on our shores right here.
All right, and you're in Chicago. I'm just looking at a headline here. Just how big are Chicago's pet coke piles? They're huge. They're massive. What's the problem, though? It's a fuel. People need fuel. You need, power, etc. Why would these piles of pet coke in Chicago? Why would that be an issue?
Well, the problem we have, first off, is that they're openly stored. So what happens is at 15 miles an hour, this waste product actually leaves the facility that they have, and it is right in the neighborhood. It's a stone's throw away. Yeah. We have a baseball field that is, less than 100 feet away from the railway that actually transports it into our neighborhood, and it's stored openly along our Calumet River. Yeah,
actually, I'm looking at the Calumet River right now. I'm zooming in on Google, and I'm just going to go a little bit closer here. I'm going to zoom in even closer, and here's the pet coke pile, and here are the houses, like right here. Yes. Like right across the road. So if I lived across the road from the huge pet coke pile, what would happen to me?
Well, what happens is we at 15 miles an hour, we have a dust that just basically blankets our community. Right. And it is such a big problem to us that it's not. We can't even go into our own homes and be protected from this dust. I mean, I have an air filter here that actually is from a home that's located in that neighborhood, and it is here. Let me show you it. Now,
no way. Is that a black air filter or is it a white one? What color was it when it started off?
It was white.
No way. Now, is that 3 years worth of, you haven't changed your air filter like me? Or is that a few weeks?
That's actually from 1 week in December.
Are you kidding me?
And, if you're from the Midwest, from Chicago, in the wintertime during December, there is no way there's no windows open. So this is what's actually in the homes.
That's extraordinary. Malika, what do you have?
Well, I want to push us just not too far away from Chicago, but to Detroit, where people are facing another issue. This is a video comment we received from Kimberly Hill out of Detroit, Michigan, and she says what some people there are facing. Have a listen.
This community is special because they've been fighting for environmental justice for years, and many of them have asthma and other respiratory illnesses, as well as cancer.
Gregory, she talked about asthma and some other sicknesses people there are facing based on a water treatment plant. I know that there's a sewage treatment plant where your community, where you were. Tell us about some of the things that people there faced.
Yes, ma'am. I can definitely tell you a lot of the things that were so negative in our community. There were sewer flies. As a matter of fact, I can give you a picture right off. If you can take a look at that, those are types of sewer flies that fly out of this sewage treatment facility.
Hold it up again, Greg, because I can't see anything. Hold it up again, right up to your camera, so we can't see your face. All right, okay. There we go. Huh.
Okay, yeah, we're faced with sewer flies and horrible odors from the sewage treatment facility. Greg. It constantly deteriorates the living conditions, the health issues that we have in our community, because we have children and adults that are living in this community, and the asthma, the respiratory, the sickness in the stomachs, it's just a variety of problems. And then they also want to expand this sewage treatment facility onto Southern University next to the students that living in the dorms there. And we've already had enough problems with this for over 20 years. We've been fighting this condition, and it's just the city government here in Baton Rouge just doesn't help our community.
Gregory, I'm looking at this sewage treatment plant right here, and I'm seeing some vats, and it's quite a large area, and the homes aren't too far away from it. How much warning did you get that this was going to come into your community? How much liaison did you get about?
Very little.
There's going to be a smell, obviously. Compensation for your homes, that kind of thing.
Compensation for the home was the process that they gave was a horrible process for this community. Fighting with the odors and everything that the problems that we were already faced with, and then we ended up having to go through this buyout process, which was a horrible process. But if you listen to the city parish, they would tell you that everything went fine, everything went smoothly, which we know as citizens is a definite lie. They also tried to tell us as we were going through the situation of living in this horrible mess with all the odors and all the negativity. The city, if you listen to the city, they will let you know, they will tell you that everything is okay. The people up in this area, they're just complaining for no reason, and we were just making a lot of noise for no reason. But the community knew what was going on. Elected officials, they knew what was going on, but it's just as we always say, they run for election, but when it's time to help this community, they run from the problems and the people that they need to help and serve. And that's what we've been finding a problem in, like I say, with the conditions that we've lived in, the mist that comes from those open tanks that you just showed on screen. Yeah. There's a mist that comes from there that blankets our community. Who would want to live in those odors and in those types of mist that are coming from a sewage treatment facility?
All right.
It's just a horrible thing, and it continues to grow, and we continue to suffer. Right. And that's why we are here trying to get more assistance and get help and bring everybody into the loop to let them know that we are suffering here in Baton Rouge.
Gregory, as you have been talking, Rebecca's been nodding her head a lot. Rebecca, what's going on here? I mean, these are different communities, different parts of the United States. They all seem to be having similar problems, even though the cause might be something quite different. Is it a big leap to join the dots here?
Say it again?
Rebecca.
I'm hearing...
Yeah,
I'm hearing everyone's stories.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah. Go ahead, Rebecca.
I'm hearing everyone's stories here, and it seems it's similar, right? The community that I organize with, one of the communities I organize with, I have a feeling a lot of folks would have a lot in common with. We work in a neighborhood where there's 53 major air facilities and pollution sources, and it's very similar thing. It takes so much work to even just get enforcement agency attention. There's lots of convincing, right? Lots of work that regular people have to do.
Tell me about the
to
convincing.
Convince there even is an issue.
Yeah, tell us about the convincing. How does the convincing work?
So in our case, our organization started by residents in Tonawanda, New York, which is a first-ring suburb of the city of Buffalo, and they noticed there was lots of cancer, in their neighborhood. You go door to door, and there's usually at least one case of cancer in Tonawanda, and so they started knocking on doors. They started holding community meetings, doing lots of things that I'm sure the rest of the folks here on this show, have done, and they did their own air sampling when the environmental enforcement agency wouldn't do it. And so those results came back, and benzene levels, which are a human carcinogen, we know it causes cancer, were 365 times over what the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, our federal enforcement agency, says is healthy, is safe. And so we then got the state to get involved, to do more studies, more sampling. Years later, we did lots of rallies at the gates of the company, and that eventually led to an enforcement action and a raid of the plant.
Finally, how many years later was that?
Oh, this was years. This was years. Our organization started in about 2005, 2006, just around kitchen tables, and the enforcement action didn't happen until 2010. And then the actual criminal case did not happen until 2014.
Wow. Malika.
So Julian, you hear these stories, and online people are talking about whether or not there is something in common. So there's a tweet here from Rebecca who says, low-income neighborhoods equal common target for industrial pollution. It's a common practice in Canada, the US, and beyond. And that's Rebecca's view. But I want to pick up on that word target. Do you think that these communities were targeted, or is there something else going on?
I think the communities were targeted. I think communities were targeted because largely you have communities with low-income people. That means people are going to be working one job with a lot of hours or multiple jobs with a lot of hours. They may not have the opportunity or the time to show up to a hearing to have their input on these issues. So it's an easier target. If you're looking at trying to put something dirty and nasty in a community, you're going to go for the community that has the least amount of resources to push back, ask
Julian,
questions.
do you think that the board members sit around the table and go, let's put something dirty and nasty in the community, let's go to the south side of Chicago? They won't argue with us.
I'm not going to speak for their intentions. I don't think they're sitting around, with Klan hoods on or anything. But I think if you look at the numbers, 68% of African Americans live within 30 miles of a coal plant. I don't think that's an accident. That means 1 in 6 kids, African American kids, have asthma versus 1 in 10 of the general population. The numbers are similar for Latino communities. They're similar for Native American communities, poor white communities. So I do think there's an intentionality around putting these places where they don't think they're going to have a squeaky wheel to deal with.
Gregory, go ahead. What are we going to add?
Well, yeah, I wanted to add on to Rebecca. She said that they've been fighting for a very long time. Well, I want to kind of commend you, continue to fight, okay? But I also want to say that we started this fight and we filed suit against the city of Baton Rouge in 1996. And we were fighting before then, okay? And there were, so many things that they tried to discourage us from saying anything. They wanted to make sure that we were quiet. We continued to fight. We continued to march. We continued to beat the council, meet with them, and try and get things done. We went from every
Why do you think
official.
It was so hard, Gregory? Why was it such a fight? It was obvious that the environment around you was incredibly unhealthy. Why did you have to fight so hard?
Because the fight was because, like the old saying goes, the water flows where there's least resistance. And they feel that there's least resistance because a lot of the people in this community have low income. They don't have the funds to try and fight the city parish. So, and a lot of people weren't really clear on how to get to the right people. So as we got together and joined together and did the marches and met with councils and met with elected officials from Washington, we were even trying to get in contact with President Obama. Anybody that could possibly give us some help. We needed it because we know what our community is going through. We know what the courts did to us. We had the court, the first court, the 19th Judicial Court here in Baton Rouge, which ruled in our favor.
See, Gregory, the first part of your action, you actually won, and then you lost on appeal. So it's like an ongoing process. I'm going to come back to your story in a moment. But first, let me just bring in Malika again.
Well, I do want to note, Gregory, that the Baton Rouge Mayor's Office did tell the Stream, they sent us a statement, and this is what they say: all residents have now been relocated and the buffer area cleared for the construction of the vegetative odor control buffer, which is currently in design. Construction is expected to begin in 2016. So it says that there's a buffer. It's almost seemingly admitting that things weren't okay, and so they've been changed. What do you make of that?
Well, the city parish will always consistently lie, okay? This mayor,
So
Mayor Melvin
this is in your opinion here, Gregory, because we're on live TV, right?
Yes,
in your opinion, there may not see the truth the way you see it.
Exactly.
Right.
But I've lived it, so I know the truth. I know what we've gone through, so therefore I can speak it for facts. And as I was saying earlier, the courts even let this community down. We went all the way to the appeals court here, and then we went from there to the Louisiana Supreme Court, and basically they ended up saying that the community should live in these type of conditions. We've even gone to the Environmental Protection Agency with the Civil Rights Division, and they constantly, and they still deny citizens, that are complaining, and put them on the back burner. So that's what's been happening systematically for a long, very long time. And we continue
and Gregory,
to get...
as you're talking, I'm looking out of the corner of my eye and I see Samuel. And Samuel, I know that you can slightly relate to this, but I want to pick up on a conversation that I'm seeing online, and I want to pose it to you. So this is a comment we got on Facebook. This is Ewan, who says, how can you apply race to something as literally indiscriminate as air pollution? And he's talking about people who say that this is environmental racism. So he gets a response online. This is someone who responded saying, having more money gives you more options on where to live, like not downstream of a toxic chemical plant, or not next to an industrial zone, or in an unpolluted area, and so on. So they are pointing out the fact that sometimes race is an issue. What do you make of that little argument there?
Well, I mean, the way we see it is, I mean, if you have the means, you move out of our neighborhood. I mean, we are a neighborhood that's surrounded by, as I can sympathize with what Gregory says, because we have a sewage treatment plant just a few miles down the road. We are surrounded by nothing but petroleum coke piles of openly stored, and we also have landfills. We are the only section of Chicago that has mountains, but they're not really mountains. There are landfills. And to say that, when you look at the demographic of people that actually leave the neighborhood, it's most times it is not the minority neighbors that leave our neighborhood. We are actually the ones that can't afford to leave. So we are the ones that get stuck with this this problem. And when you have a history like we do, we were a section of Chicago that was heavily invested in the steel mill industry. When the steel mills left, they left their contaminated properties just there. And now we deal with the effects of open contaminated land. And now because of that, we have industry that comes in and tells us, well, we'll give you jobs. And this is the industry that we're going to bring you.
It's the choice, gives us jobs or your health. Is that the choice for you, Sam?
Please.
You know what? That's what it seems to be, and the industry we do have in here tends to take a targeted approach of profit over people, and that's what our when we sit here and go door to door with our neighbors and start to have the conversation of organizing and trying to see why we have these conditions. It seems to be that the common consensus within our neighborhood is that the industry we have that is anchored in our neighborhoods is profit over people.
All right, let me just bring back in Rebecca here, because a lot of these stories are horrible, appalling stories, but Rebecca had that little success to share with us. I want to show you here, this is what Rebecca was talking about. This newspaper here was from April the 5th in 2013, I believe. Coke found guilty. Somebody actually went to prison for what they did to that community. Rebecca, what do people do if they're in a situation, they're in a community where their health is at risk, where the environment is actually damaging them? What should they do?
I mean, my initial reaction is always organize, you know, always organize. And I'm constantly in awe of the amount of stories that and strength of the people that I work with and residents in Tonawanda, New York, who, you know, are just trying to do the best they can, take care of either themselves or their loved ones who are sick, you know, and still make time to go out and listen and hold other people's stories, and then to tell their stories to people in positions of power and decision makers, even though those people might not want to hear them. I mean, I remember the first time the state environmental enforcement agency met with residents of our organization, members of our organization, and you know, they were presenting on their data and their facts around the pollution in Tonawanda and said, you know, we know it's really high, we know there's a lot of companies here, but that's okay because nobody lives here. And we have a member who was at that meeting and says, well, I live here, literally points to her house on the map across the street from the company. And so I think that that's hard and that's scary and that takes a tremendous amount of strength, especially when, you know, people who are supposed to protect us sometimes don't want to hear it.
I want you to hear Samuel in full force at a rally, hear his passion. Have a listen to this. This is last week, actually.
How long will it be before our neighborhood is we only allowed to walk outside with something like this? Is that the answer we're looking for? No! What we're asking you to do is call up our state representatives, call up our federal representatives, and tell them that the southeast side is tired of this. We're tired of it. We don't want it no more. If they want that industry so much, put it in their backyard. Yeah. Eric Holzman, take agriculture.
It's got to go in someone's backyard there, Samuel, but the quality you need to organize, what would it be?
Well, I mean, the thing that we started, I mean, our organization is so small, we only have actually one employee, and that's a part-time employee. So everything we've been doing in our struggle has been trying to gather, you know, at a grassroots level, volunteers, neighbors, going door to door, trying to educate them about what the problem is when we have fugitive dust that flows in the air that is unmonitored, you know, and when we have this industry that tends to we didn't even know that petroleum coke was coming into our neighborhood. Our local elected official actually was privy to that information, but we never did. It wasn't until, you know, members of our organization started, you know, with an actual picture of a black cloud leaving the open storage sites. And then from there, the community started asking the question, what is this? What is this? So we started to go and try and figure out and putting pressure on the elected official, putting pressure onto the city to find out even what that was. Well, then we started to research what petroleum coke is and how it's basically
you have to be, it feels to me like tenacious and never giving up. I feel, just listening to you right now, Samuel, you will never stop until you get what you want.
Exactly that. And, you know, and before our conversation, you know, if we were able to sip these companies was to be a good neighbor, keep all your waste product on your property. But the problem is they don't see no, it would cost them less to sit there and deal with the fines than to actually build and impose.
Take a breath, because I want to share this last moment here with Julian. Julian, what did you want to add? Just very briefly, we're almost at the end of the show.
Well, I just wanted to call attention to the pattern that we're seeing here with all three of our guests, and I want to thank our guests so much because when you talk about environmental justice, it's
Julian,
really these stories that are.
Because we're going to be at the end of the show, and I'll be thanking you. Go ahead. One point.
It's disproportionately to communities all around the country, and it's taking place. And it goes back to what Samuel said: companies putting people over profits. It's not that they can't do right; it's that they don't want to do right because it affects their bottom line.
Malika, what do you have?
I will end with this from Chris, who says he is affected by environmental racism. He says, once you live in an impacted area, you learn you can't run. The industry is too big to escape anymore. You have to fight, especially if you're sick.
So Julian thanked the guests. I will thank Julian and Rebecca and Samuel and Gregory and you as well. We're taking our show online to stream.aljazeera.com. Hopefully you can join us there, or at least watch it on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Hi, we're discussing environmental justice in the United States. I want to get right back to that conversation. Julian, I had no idea that the Environment Protection Agency in the United States had a civil rights department. That is bizarre for me. What do you know about that department that you can share with us?
Well, I think that department is in place because so much of, and historically, you've seen so much, the Environmental Protection Agency is charged with protecting people in the planet from environmental toxins, and so much of those toxins found their way into communities of color and poor communities that there had to be a specific effort by the EPA to ensure that those communities were protected. And so now whenever you have regulations coming through the Environmental Protection Agency, they have to weigh the effect that those regulations will have on all communities. And I think it speaks to the fact that, as you've heard from our guests today, there is no action unless you push for action, unless you organize and you push for action to ensure that your needs are met. And so that's what we see there.
Rebecca, what do you make of the EPA and the work that they're doing? Do you feel like they're on your side, or do you feel like you're having to bring them on board? It sounded to me like the community had to do so much work to even get anybody to even pay attention in your situation.
I mean, at this point, Tonawanda is on the EPA's radar.
Yeah. And then some.
It took a long time to get there, but you know, I can confidently say in this administration, we're at least on the radar. But I think that is not necessarily the situation in most neighborhoods that face these types of pollution issues.
So, yes. Samuel, if we were just looking, Samuel, with your crew of one and yourself, what's next on your agenda? Do you want to get rid of pet coke, or do you just want to get it covered, or you just want to move somewhere else? What's the strategy here?
Well, at first, when we thought they were going to, this corporation was going to be a good neighbor, we were requesting them to enclose it. Yeah. But they went through with the plan, and to them that plan wasn't financial feasible for them. So they went from they're going to change their mode of operations from a storage facility to an actual direct transfer. And to us, what does
that mean, Samuel?
What that means is we're going to have pet coke trains coming through our neighborhoods, and they're going to unload onto barges that will take the waste product into our Calumet River and take it onto a boat that exports this byproduct. I mean, this waste product.
And probably to a poor brown community somewhere else, by the way. In another country.
There speaks the voice. I've experienced or a cynic. I'm not sure which, or maybe an experienced cynic.
Yeah, experienced. No, I'm not a cynic. I'm not a cynic at all. But I bet you it's true.
Oh my goodness! See, now I want to research that, Julian, to see actually where it's going to.
It actually goes to countries like China, India, Mexico, countries that have no actual air quality regulations. So even though from our experience and our thought that the Environmental Protection Agency is kind of weak when it comes to dealing with pet coke, they're actually on the ball to understand that burning pet coke as an energy source, it's too dirty of a waste product to actually use it. So it is shipped to places like China, India, Mexico, Argentina.
So we asked KCBX, which is the company that's storing, excuse me a moment, Gregory, has the stashes of pet coke. We asked them, because we knew this was going to come up and it's contentious. This is part of what they told us. They said nearly 2 years of air monitoring data show that air quality near the KCBX terminal is consistent with federal clean air standards. Now, either the standards are really low or there's some disconnect here with what they're telling us and telling you, the community.
Well, according to what they say, and that's one of the problems that we've been facing is their whole turn of actual things that aren't true. Their misinformation campaign about us. Well, first off, it took the community to organize and a fight for 2 years to actually shut down 2 open storage sites. One of them, which was actually operating without the proper permit to handle petroleum coke. And we had actually 2 violations of the Clean Air Act that KCBX violated. They also have a monitoring system that monitors PM10, and that to us is not effective enough. We want monitoring
Samuel,
systems.
excuse me for being, I was going to say a dumb whatever, but I don't know what PM10 is, and why should I be worried about it?
Well, PM is actually particular matter, and it's the grade of the size of the particular matter that actually flies into the air.
I need to pay more attention at school. It's been a long time since I was at school. All right, great. All right, let me just bring in Malika. She's got some more stuff from my community.
Well, Samuel, I'm actually going to play a video comment from someone from your organization who's facing what you face often. This is Peggy, who sent this to the stream.
The southeast side of Chicago has been looked upon as a dumping ground since the early part of the last century, when steel mills and other local industries would dump their waste indiscriminately throughout the area. That was followed by municipal landfills that filled acres and acres of land. We are tired of being dumped on. We are tired of being the sacrifice zone. We no longer need this stuff in our community. We want to improve it, make it a better, healthier place for our residents to live.
So Samuel, of course, you can relate to that, but Julian, she says we're tired of being dumped on. And so with that in mind, I want to take you to this tweet that we got. This is someone who says, lack of a strong political representation plus economic financial means equals David against Goliath. How do you shift that balance?
I think you shift it by lifting up the stories of the people that are on this show right now. I think you lift it, you shift it by not only looking at what needs to be done to stop these dirty industries, but what are the alternatives we have, and how do we shift our economy in a way that gives us that takes away that the notion that you have to choose between your health and a job. That's not true, and it shouldn't be true for anybody. And that's why, at Green for All, what we're doing is pushing towards shifting away from dirty energy, dirty industries, to a clean economy that really puts people at the center, and ensuring that it's not just about solar panels, but it's about the people, and it's about the jobs and the work, and making sure that all communities are recognized in that. And so I think that's what you do, and I think you see it happening. I think our movement is growing across the board. I think one of the biggest environmental justice fights that we've seen started with indigenous communities in Canada and spread to communities here in the United States, indigenous and farming communities in the north. The Keystone XL pipeline was just shut down after years of organizing that started with just a few people. They said it was impossible, and it became possible last week.
And that's
I think that's a good
big
example.
Contentious pipeline that was going to run from Canada?
That's right. That would be transporting. Yeah, from Canada, tar sands, at which Samuel, that's what the coke that they're dealing with there, all the way down to Houston and out the Gulf of Mexico, endangering the entire path along the oil line, not to mention the damage that dirty oil would do environmentally and in terms of climate change. So to me, I'm not a cynic. I'm actually an optimist, but I'm a realist, and I think that's an incredible opportunity there. And there's others, just one more. I mean, what we're working on is around the Environmental Protection Agency's Clean Power Plan, which has its flaws, and some people may speak to that, but also presents a huge opportunity. What it requires is states to limit the amount of carbon that goes into the atmosphere, the amount of greenhouse gases. There's a huge opportunity there to do that in a way that grows the environment, grows green sector, green energy, creates jobs and opportunity, and really allows us to push forward on a shift to a green economy that will not poison our people.
So let's kind of look at the more optimistic side of this conversation. So have a look here on my laptop. This is your old neighborhood, Gregory. So we're looking here. What's here? Do you even recognize this?
Yeah, this is the area that I grew up in. This is where my family and my friends and I went to school, and these were our homes where we lived, and they're all torn down. As you can see, they were destroying them, and just like they destroyed those homes, they destroyed our families, they destroyed our lives. We have to continue to push and fuss and bring awareness to this issue and these issues, because, as I've said before, the EPA has basically failed, from our opinion, has basically failed us and continue to fail us from the Civil Rights Division. Our mayor here, Mayor Melvin Kipp Holden, when we got started some years ago,
So Gregory, I'm going to, your story could be a book, so I'm just going to cut it short just a little bit. But this house looks nice. I like this house. And here's your mum. This is you on the doorstep. Is this a result? Are we talking success here? Because you're now in a new neighborhood this
we're talking that you know, she's in a better environment.
Yeah.
And that's my mother. And I'm happy to see that she's in a better environment. She's comfortable. But like I say, the city parish did not compensate the citizens as they should. They tried to continue to cut them on every penny that they could possibly cut.
All right.
They really, really.
This is beginning to sound like a very familiar story here. I'm going to show you one more picture. This is KCBX. KCBX sent us a couple of statements about how they were not in violation of any regulations. But this is interesting here. They have a graph of their south terminal right now, and in 2016, those piles are going to be gone. Result, Samuel, there?
Well, I'm skeptical about what they say, because at one time they told us they were going to build an enclosed facility, and that fell on its face. So, you know, from anything that we actually hear from them, we take that with a grain of salt, and we really don't put very much into whatever they say, because the simple fact is we have to force them to actually start to put and implement policy. We actually have to, you know, attack the city on, you know, regulations, and they created, you know, an ordinance to us which had not as much bite as what they sit there and say it is.
So
and
Rebecca,
I mean, when we have community.
Yeah, do you think, I'm just wondering, guys, do you think there'll be a time when you won't have to force, you won't have to push, you won't have to campaign for situations like the ones that you found yourself in, Rebecca? Do you feel that we will just change the way that we actually think about where we put industries, where are people living, how we treat people who happen to be living in the path of industry that might be damaging their health? Are we getting a bit more, I don't know, sophisticated about how we deal with this?
I think it still comes down to who is making those decisions and who decides the process to make those decisions.
So then that's
and as long as the decisions are made by people about a neighborhood or about a community, by people who don't live in that community, we're going to keep seeing problems like this.
Sure.
Because the decision-making power isn't held with the people who, you know, those decisions.
Say for instance, in our community, where I've said before that the mayor of the city, he went to court with us and testified on our behalf. And once he became the mayor, he basically abandoned the community, turned his back on the citizen. So it's basically the same thing that we continue to get. You know, they'll talk, but they'll give you one thing, and they'll totally do a different thing in the end. And they will actually try and make the citizens seem as if they are in the wrong, instead of trying to come out and see what's really going on in our community.
All right, so thank you, guests, Gregory and Samuel, and Rebecca and Julian, for giving us some insight into a phrase that we might not be that familiar with, environmental racism, and actually unpacking it, and what does it mean, certainly when it comes to the United States. Malika.
Well, there is some skepticism naturally online, so I'm going to end with this tweet from someone who wrote in: history teaches us that corporate wealth buys political power and always wins, but of course, as we heard today, perhaps not always.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, guests, for being part of the stream today. Take care.